And now you're here. So.
Excited, very excited. We've already got some big guests on tap.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to an emergency podcast live. Longest tenured Eagles coach will no longer be with the team, or at least won't be coaching. No sound at all? Oh, no sound at all. Go ahead, EJ. Go ahead, Fran.
All right, so yeah, obviously, like, really surprising. Yeah, for a lot of reasons. Like, when I first saw the news, my head went in a million different directions because of the way that Stout has had such an impact on the organization. Like, how much does this impact Lane Johnson's decision for this offseason? How much does this impact the draft and team building and all aspects? And obviously, there's the schematic change with the hiring of Sean Mannion and Josh Grizzard. Like, all right, well, those two ideologies not mesh anymore. My guess is that's what spurned this. But to me, like, he's been here for so long, over my right shoulder. I know that's a tighter shot than normal, but like over my right shoulder, there's like a Super Bowl, like, commemorative, like the Eagles don't have a Super Bowl, in my opinion, if Jeff Stoutland, if it's a different offensive line coach, like, if they don't have one of the best, not just like line coaches, but position coaches in football, at that position, knowing like that was the driving force behind so much of their success over the last decade plus, obviously, like, there's a lot of ways it's going to impact it. And like, obviously, you guys know, like, my head is with the draft right now, and Jeff Stoutland loves, like, capital LOVE, like, loves the draft process.
Yeah.
And is like, fully engulfed in that, like, loves the evaluation and projection and writing reports, watching guys. And to me, like, all right, like a new offensive line coach comes in, it changes the entire rubric. That's a big shakeup. It's a huge shakeup.
It's crazy. It's hard to even think about what, like, an Eagles offensive line is going to look like without Jeff Stoutland. And I think we had some audio issues at the beginning, EJ, but your understanding here of how this came to pass.
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is that this is very sudden. I think both for Eagles fans and also Eagles players, Eagles coaches. I think that this is something that unfolded quickly and was somewhat unexpected internally. And yeah, my understanding is that the Eagles wanted to retain Jeff Stoutland, and that I think they would hope to have him around the building and around the facility in some capacity. But I do think that there's a lot of unknowns, whether it is going to be retirement, whether he's going. I mean, he will get interest across the NFL. He is one of the best offensive line coaches, honestly, of a generation, one of the best offensive line developers. What Fran said about the draft, and just to think about the player development side of what Jeff Stoutland brings for an organization. So I think it is there are a lot of unknowns. It's going to be interesting to follow what happens with Jeff Stoutland over the next couple of weeks. But yes, the thing that stands out to me is that this is very sudden. So I think that there is some catching up that we're all going to have to do here.
it's really interesting to parse, and I don't think we're really going to know the truth about this for a while, because already you're hearing sort of conflicting accounts of what happened here.
Yeah.
Anthony Gargano said that his expectation is that Stout is going to retire.
Yes.
The Eagles are essentially saying that they expect him to be in the building to some capacity. As you said, Mike Garafolo saying he expects the rest of the league to check in and bring him in. You know, listen, we did that a great episode last summer with Allison Stoutland about just, you know, Stout and his passion for coaching. I would be surprised if he doesn't want to keep coaching. And for this announcement to be him saying that he's stepping down from coaching with the Eagles, this is just speculation. I read that as he was unhappy with whatever his expected role was going to be. And I don't know if that means there's a clash with Sean Mannion and the staff that he wants to bring in. I don't know if it's a clash with, you know, Nick and the way things went last year and sort of the blame being apportioned for the running game. It's very interesting, and it's certainly not a money thing, because, you know, I can tell you the reporting of it that, you know, Jeff Stoutland has been the league's highest paid position coach for some time at least he was at that level. I'm very surprised.
Yeah, no, two things on that. First and foremost, as we've talked about on the show, Jeff McClain's reporting about him losing the run game coordinator title. I do think that there is an element to this where the Eagles were pushing toward more of a play-action, motion-heavy offense, and we have heard that clashes in some ways with the way that Jeff Stoutland likes to operate. But I want to push back a little bit on you saying you wouldn't be surprised. You would be surprised if he isn't coaching. He has been coaching for decades now.
Yeah.
And I do think, you know, I would say that my understanding is that this year did take a significant toll on him. You know, obviously it took a significant toll on the offensive line across the board, and we haven't heard from Jeff Stoutland in a long time. So I think it wouldn't shock me if he took at least a year away from coaching. Maybe not a full-on retirement, but stepping away from the game for some time to regroup. You know, it is – I understand that these great coaches, you know, we talked about it with Vic Fangio last week, ironically enough.
It's an interesting thing,
These great coaches, I do think that there's always this push-pull. You know, I mean, honestly, I saw it in my own life with my dad, where there's a push-pull of, like, you always want to be around football and you want to coach, but there's also a toll that it takes on you. So, again, I think that it's just, at this point, I would just say it's fluid. It is a very, you know, like I said, it's a fresh thing that has happened here. It was very sudden, so I don't know if we know for certain what's next for Jeff Stoutland, but I think what we do know for certain is that this is going to be a really big blow for the Eagles coaching staff at a time when they are trying to fill out an offensive staff with Sean Mannion.
Yeah, I was texting with someone around the league who said, you know, probably the greatest position coach, you know, in NFL history in their estimation. And I don't think that that's off the table. But, Fran, as you look back on Stout and everything he did for the Eagles over the past 13 years, what are like the big things that come to mind for you?
I mean, certainly the energy and the passion, right? The how much, like, it was very clear how much he loved the details of everything that he had to do, and how much, like, he was a stickler for those details, and how much you know, that impacted success. But then I get into, like, the passion for the draft. The other one, guys, like, I mean, it was, I forget what, you know, at what point this ended. I think it would have been probably with when Andre Dillard was officially out of the league, maybe like last year. But it was like a decade plus of him holding this position, and every single offensive lineman the Eagles drafted in that span was still in the NFL. Like, day 3 picks, day 2, you know, first. That is a hit rate that, like, yeah, like, not every pick worked, not every pick hit. Like, you know, Andre Dillard obviously did not work out, but those guys, to be able to draft and say, like, yeah, like, this guy's going to be an NFL lineman at that position, it's really, really valuable. That is a really hard thing to do for the amount of time that he did it. You know, and obviously you give a lot of credit. There's a lot of credit to go around there, not just to Stoutland, but to development staff, scouting staff, everybody. But you know, to me, to have that kind of a hit rate, that is something that is, like, eye-opening for me. But then obviously you get into, like, the relationships he has with his players, and you guys covered that with his wife, with Allison, over the summer, in terms of, like, you know, Brandon Brooks and Jason Kelsey and Lane Johnson, and how much, you know, like, Lane obviously going through, like, the ups and downs of Lane's career in terms of, you know, everything that he has dealt with from a mental health standpoint, and how much Stout was able to help him through that, and you know, and get him to, you know, be like a future Hall of Famer. I mean, just it's an unbelievable. It's a huge loss. It's a huge loss.
Kelsey already tweeting about it, saying that there is absolutely no one I credit more with the career I had than Jeff Stoutland. The consistent passion and his eagerness to teach pushed my teammates, me, and our room to amazing success. More importantly, we became incredibly close as people. It was more than just coaching and teaching. It was his presence and sense of urgency that was unaccepting of mediocrity and potential left behind. He will undoubtedly be missed inside the building and everyone that played for him. I am incredibly grateful to have played for Stout, one of one, coach and person. I love you, Coach.
I think
Jeffrey Lurie released a statement as well. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to go ahead. I want to hear the Jeffrey.
No,
okay.
you go first.
The thing that's I think one of the ripple effects we really do need to talk about is Lane Johnson.
Yeah.
You know, we've talked a lot about the potential for him to retire, and you know, I'll be honest with you. You know, I said probably a month ago that I was leaning maybe 50-50. I think I had probably gone maybe 40-60. Like, I was a little bit more confident that Lane Johnson was going to return for another season at the very least. And I'll be honest, the Stoutland news, I don't think it's as simple as saying definitively that it has changed the percentages a certain amount. I think, again, it's something that he will have to process, and it will be a big factor, I imagine, because of the relationship that they have. So there are a lot of ripple effects here at play, and Lane Johnson is definitely one of them. So, again, I think it would probably be a little bit unfair to Lane to, like, immediately say, like, okay, he's probably retiring because Stoutland's out.
Right.
But I do think that this is going to be a significant – I mean, it's going to be depleting for somebody like Lane Johnson, who has only known Stoutland as his offensive line coach.
And listen, I'll read the Eagles statement in a second, but the Eagles are really into the wilderness here because it is the most important position group in football, and it's the most important position coach you have. And the delta between a great offensive line coach or even a good offensive line coach and just a mediocre offensive line coach is huge. And it's player development. It's getting, you know, as Stout says, everybody moving the same way. It's the, you know, the Sirianni-like attention to detail. And, you know, the difference between a great, let's say the 5th best head coach in the league and the 20th best head coach in the league is I think less of a factor on the team than the difference between the best head coach in the league and the 20th best offensive line coach in the league. It's really significant. You've seen it across the league, and so now the Eagles, late in the hiring cycle, are going to have to find an offensive line coach who they can trust to handle a group that really, really, really needs to be better than it was last season.
Yeah, I have a name for Fran here that I want to hear from Fran on.
Okay.
I know that Frank Smith was somebody that they interviewed during their offensive coordinator search.
Okay.
Do you
That's
think that is a name that would make sense for a replacement for Stoutland here?
1,000% would make a lot of sense. I actually, that's a great idea, EJ, in terms of, like, all right, who's the first thing? But honestly, like, Bo, as you were saying that and laying out, like, the difference between, you know, the 20th best and the 5th best. Honestly, it's this. I think of it with, like, Vic. Like, you know, there was all the conversation about Vic Fangio leaving, and it's like, all right, well, you know, Vic Fangio leaves. That's a huge loss. All right, well, you know, there's Jim Schwartz and there's other candidates where it's like, okay, like, there's a level of success that you would expect with some of these other candidates. Frank Smith is a great one, especially because of his history with this style of offense. I think that would make sense. Now, my understanding of, you know, I don't know everything about Frank Smith, but my understanding is that he is more on, like, the schematic end of things as opposed to like the TK. And that's again, like, that's why this is such a big loss, is that you are not going to replace that. You're not going to find a 1-for-1 replacement for Jeff Stoutland. Like that's not happening. You know, there's no one that's walking through that door that can match him from an evaluation, teaching, connectivity, and schematic, like the full spider chart there for Jeff Stoutland. That person doesn't exist in the NFL, and so you're going to have that loss somewhere. I think that, honestly, this goes also, you know, you guys, you had the conversation with Dane Is at the end of last week and talking about, all right, what the offense could look like in 2026 if you lose A.J. Brown and you lose Lane Johnson, you lose Dallas Goedert. If you have these losses, that puts more on the scheme. Well, if the offensive line is not clicking to the level that we've come to expect, like, that puts even more on the scheme. Again, like, you know, you mentioned, like, going out into the wilderness. Yeah, like, other teams, you don't always have that offensive line to be able to fall back on. Now you have to be able to make things for Jalen Hurts and for the run game, and that's where you're going to have to lean on Mannion and Grizzard to overcome this.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the insight, Fran, and for joining us. We got to wrap things up here on Radio Row, but obviously we're going to discuss this much more on tomorrow's show, live at 4 o'clock Eastern Time, and if anything else happens in the meantime, we'll have you covered on social media. But a very interesting series of developments for the Eagles. We'll stay tuned and see what happens here.
Yeah, crazy news.
All right, so thank everybody for joining us on this emergency podcast. We will talk to you tomorrow at 4 o'clock, and as always, we love you.
We all silly like the mayor.